Right, guys, welcome to episode 2 of Bros Meet Science, and we are going to discuss multiple topics today. The main topic today is going to be a question asked from one of our followers, Sam. The question is: thoughts on pump training with a secondary focus on logbook beats sheer logbook progression training. So what he's trying to basically say is, what is our opinion on a, I'm assuming so, right, a low volume, high frequency approach, we say high volume, high frequency approach, right?
I think this question is probably coming because obviously Sam's a client of mine, and we've just changed his training up after a while of being purely logbook focused and progression focused to a more volume based approach. So I imagine that he is seeing some big benefits from that. And obviously the three of us have all done similar sort of things over the years. So it is a good question. And I know, like I say, Sam was very, not against, but not keen on running it at the start, to be honest, which a lot of clients seem to be, especially in England. Everybody is very logbook focused, very progressive overload focused. It seems to be a British thing, as the rest of the world are not that focused on it in terms of bodybuilding. So he wasn't very fond of trying it, but now we are 4 or 5 weeks in post-show and he is really benefiting from it. Now there's a particular, and I'll discuss this after you two because I tend to waffle too much. But there's a reason we brought it in for him post-show. And there's a reason that I like to do that with clients. But I think the only thing that I want to know is all types of training works. It is always about creating a progressive overload on the muscle, forcing it to adapt, which will result in more muscle. So that is a by the by, in my opinion. And that comes through intensity. You continuously training harder. You continuously pushing the muscle without getting into all the scientific jargon. It just depends on what you enjoy, what your body adapts to better, or what your tendons, your mechanics seem to suit better, or just what you were doing in your external environment. But the key thing to remember is, if you go in and do the same volume with the same intensity all the time, it won't fucking work. If you go in and you do the same load with the same reps all the time, it won't work. There's Dietary, who everybody's a huge fan of. As long as you're doing more next year than you are this year, you will have progressed. And that works the same with volume. You've just got to take into a lot of extrinsic, is that the right word? Factors when you're looking at that. So I think that's the best thing to get across first. And then, Riz, Deck, do you just want to go first and then I'll do my waffle?
We'll do the white people first, go on, Dick.
It's always white people first. It's not the apartheid era anymore, but I'm happy to jump on first because I think, and I'm going to try and stay away from the science jargon and the intricate detail, and I'll just base this on my experience alone. So I started bodybuilding due to the Strength Asylum days with JP, Sass, and Hollinshead. I was a logbook warrior till the day that I died, and it was extremely beneficial to me at the start, where I needed that logbook to benchmark my progress so I had something to refer to. So going back to what Hilly said, I don't think there is a right or wrong, but I definitely think your training experience will dictate what is more beneficial to you. So the reason I came away from the logbook, and obviously me and Hilly discussed this in detail as we kind of did a lot of back and forth to develop my program, which actually we both universally use with a lot of our clients in the end because it just seemed to pan out really well. But ultimately what was happening with me, as I got stronger and became more in tune with my body, it actually led obviously to progress reducing over time. And what I mean by that obviously is when you jump in the gym, you're very fresh, very new to anabolics, which I technically was and still am in terms of how long I've been running anabolics in assistance. What was happening as that progress slowed down and I couldn't repeatedly improve my logbook numbers, I started to get very frustrated. And then what would happen is I started fucking hating training. So there was a need at that point for me to come away from being a pure meathead, keeping that volume extremely low, and trying to get back to kind of doing what I enjoy, which I think ultimately is what everyone enjoys, chasing a decent pump, looking half decent in the mirror, and progressing. So obviously I'm a big fan of visuals for progress. Obviously we checking pictures weekly, and so on. And I still do monitor progress, but that's just in my brain. I don't use a logbook at all anymore. It doesn't come in my bag. I don't write anything down. I understand in my brain what I did last week, I remember it, and I try to progress from there. Now, I switched from logbook to very high volume, me and Hilly originally, and it did work, and it really worked for my weaker body parts. So I've always had the ability to move weight from A to B very well, and like I've mentioned many times before, I could bench 75k dumbbells, and I literally didn't have a chest, because it was all tricep, it was all delt. When I came away from the higher volume, my weaker muscle groups really started to come up. So my chest, hamstrings, biceps, but also that higher volume training took away from my stronger points, my back, my quads. So I very soon realized that I had to kind of find a blend between the two. And we discussed this last weekend in Ultraflex Durham when we were chatting to your client Cam. I think what I found for me personally is I need a blend of both. And what I need is I need that single set of 6 to 8 reps to ultimate failure. And I mean true failure, not your mate screaming with 500 bands on his machine. I'm talking about true failure. What that does for me is that helps me keep fullness throughout the week, because that's what I was losing. When I was doing just high volume, and we were talking as an example, I was doing 5 sets of 20 squats at one point. And what would happen is during that session is my legs would just flatten out. Now, if I do the low volume heavy set initially, which is chasing my top set numbers without using a logbook, I find I hold fullness better. And then after I've done that with single compound movement on back, as an example, I'll do a chest supported row on a Life Fitness machine because I love it. And then once I've done that heavy compound, I then move to, let's just call it fluffier stuff or more accurate training. So I'll stick in a rep range between 12 and 15 and probably a back off set with a normally intensifier over 3 or 4 exercises. I don't think this is applicable to everyone, and I do believe this process works for someone who is more in tune with their body. Now, if you are new to this, I would say 90% of the questions I get from new starters is what is optimal? How do I grow more muscle? What's the best way to do it? And the simple answer is, and sorry to give that really gay, annoying answer that everyone hates, it's doing what you enjoy the most. Like what you'll stick to, what you enjoy the most, what you can stay consistent with. Because what I find happens is if you don't do that, and let's just say you follow your favorite influencer, mine's Riz. So let's just say I follow Riz and his training. What will happen over time is I look then, because I'm not enjoying it, for another source. So then I go to my next influencer and copy them. And I cannot stress this enough with anybody who's been training for a short period of time. Your detriment is the lack of consistency. It's staying on that training plan. Like I've literally been on the training plan for the best part. Similar, there has been changes for the best part of 3 years. Nothing's really changed drastically. Changing volume, maybe changing placement of the compound movements to prevent injury now that I'm a little bit stronger. But ultimately, you need to find out what works best for you. But before I carry on waffling anymore, to conclude what Sam is saying, in my opinion, the best thing is a blend of the two. So I would like 1 to 2 heavy compounds, and then I would spend the remaining 3 to 4 exercises, which will have 2 sets per exercise, or maybe 3, really driving blood into that muscle. And I know this has become very popular recently with Patrick Tor preaching about the sarcoplasmic training and all this sort of stuff, and Hanny with his FST 75 now, I think it is, or whatever it may be. But you're just seeing a shift in something that everyone's always done. But for me, I just find the optimal way to do it is a blend of, let's name it what it is, JP style of training with the old school fluff work that you would get for, say, Charles Glass.
Interesting. I agree with both of you, but see, when I first started gym, I came from a background of, we just went to the gym. I used to just do squat, deadlift, and bench, right? And you got really, really good at them, and then you started doing stuff like incline dumbbells. And there was no such thing as high volume, high frequency. You just went to the gym to fucking train, right? I think, so when I first met Hilly, I was doing a bro split. He was like, right, carry on doing your thing. I'm not going to change it because you're 6 weeks out, which was fair. We did the show, and he was like, right, we're going to do upper lower split, which is now very high frequency, right, Hilly? It's a low volume approach. I did that for like 6 months, and I remember I was absolutely fucked. And I kept doing it. It was the same session Monday as it was Thursday, and Tuesday was the same as Friday. So I got really, really strong at all these movements. And I went to him, I was like, mate, I'm tired. And he was like, right, let's do push-pull legs now. And then it was from there for like 3 or 4 years, Hilly, I was straight logbook king. Hilly tried to put me in high volume like 5 times, and I was like, I ain't doing it. I was like, I'm not doing it. The closest we got was when we were doing like a hybrid fours version. But even then, it's still not really a high volume approach. And then this past year, when I went to train with Ed last year, he was like, I'm not changing my split. And I was like, Hilly, what do you think? Should I do his split? And his was fucking high volume, right? We're talking back days, about 21 sets, yeah? And what we were doing was we were adding a set per week. So we finished on about 28 sets for back. And I was absolutely buried. They're 28 working sets, right? My stamina was mad, but the physique got very, very bubbly. I cannot deny that. But my God, when you're hammering like that, I agree with depth. You do start to look worse after a while. This is no control. This was just, right, add a set, add a set, add a set. And you've added so many fucking sets. You can't even eat to keep up. And that was literally high volume, high intensity, in and out of the gym an hour. But now I found that middle ground where we're doing high volume, but we're not titrating up the sets. We're just keeping them the same. And if I do feel like adding in an extra drop set, I will. But I think I'm advanced enough to do that. And I know when you're doing big misconception is by idiots is high volume training or a higher volume training approach means you don't lift load. You are still lifting load. You are still progressing weekly, where you're trying to progress weekly. It won't come like a push-pull legs Dante Trudal style of progress, but this isn't powerlifting. This is bodybuilding. We're trying to stimulate muscle growth, not. And I think a side effect of having a big muscle is strength. It's not always strength correlates to more muscle. They both, you know what I'm trying to say, right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I think and if you think about it, in order to get a good pump, you have to still go and absolutely smash your session. And you smash your session and you get a good pump. Whether you do that with 3 sets or 1 set, it's the same thing. And I think when you do a higher volume approach, I'm not calling anyone out. There's a lot of guys doing push-pull legs with shit arms. And there's a lot of guys with push-pull legs with lots of gaps in the physique. They hit the most muscular and they've got no arm. There's a massive gap between the armpit and the chest. And the physique is very incomplete. That's my honest opinion. I'm not sending... My physique's incomplete as well. There's lots of gaps. And that's because of the push-pull logbooking for fucking ages.
So I'll try and direct this as much as I can towards Sam's question, so I don't waffle too much on stuff that's maybe not relevant to it. So I suppose initially he's interested in thoughts on pump training with a secondary focus on logbook. So firstly, I don't think there should ever be an initial focus on pump training, ever. Unless you're using it to pre-exhaust, so you're filling the muscle that you're trying to work potentially with blood. So when you move to your heavy work, you can connect better, which is referring back to almost what Dex said, where sometimes if you're using more volume, you can connect better with the muscle, and that is very true. What I have found with people trying to bring up their weaker body parts, apart from frequency and volume, is in terms of sets, is doing some higher rep work during it helps bring more blood to the muscle so you can connect better, and that is one way of bringing up a like a body part. But I do not think any what we would call pump work should be done before your logbook work, so we need to establish that there. For me, pump work is just supersets, giant sets. You're really just trying to drive glycogen to the muscle. And the only time I think pump work is relevant or is useful, and it is very, very useful, and I know John Meadows and hypertrophy coach are very fond of training this way, and Milos is the one that started all this. You do your heavy work first, and then you use pump work to drive more nutrients, improve, increase, if I get this wrong because I can never pronounce it, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, which is just the body's sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, is the only complicated word we'll try and say there, is literally just the body's ability to store glycogen within the muscle, and you can increase the body's ability to store glycogen. So going off on a little tangent, one of the reasons why I feel most of the top bodybuilders have a more rounder, bubbly look is because they train with more volume, and it is more volume, more time under tension that trains your muscle to store more glycogen, simply because if your muscle is under tension for a prolonged period of time, say sets of 20 instead of set of 6, it needs more glycogen to keep up the work. So this comes back to what we started with. Your body has to adapt. How will it adapt? It will teach itself, it will adapt so it can hold more glycogen, so it learns to adapt to the load. But with glycogen comes fluid. So there is, in my opinion, that is your scientific reasoning for a more bubblier, rounder look in general.
Have you also realised, if you just take a step back out of bodybuilding, right? Every other sport, football, you look at the top players in the world and you train like them. Formula One, they look at the best drivers, you try to drive like them. Rugby, you look at the best players, you think what they train and what they eat, and you copy them. Bodybuilding is the only sport in the UK where people are like, right, you don't want to do what the top guys are doing. It's mental as well when you think about it.
It's not, because everybody is tuned into doing what Dorian did, who is the top English guy. So that's in my opinion, and it's just been, it's an English thing. We want to work hard. We want to lift the most weight. So I feel, but the rest of the world tends to be more volume, and I think that is where, and again, improving that glycogen storage doesn't have to just come from drying giant sets. It can come from higher rep work. It can come from more volumes of sets. But in general, to keep on at Sam's question, I don't think there's ever a need really, unless you're doing a little bit of pre-fatiguing. So, for example, if one struggles with chest, you may do pec deck flies first with a pause in contraction. So AJ has me do this at the moment, and I've done it. I used to do it with clients before, or where you were just driving blood and glycogen into that muscle first, so that you can feel it more. The same as, but we were training on Monday at the three of us, and what I like to do with some clients, if they struggle to say contract their chest, is place a bit of pressure on the pecs, so they can feel that. So they have to push their pec into it, and it drastically works. It's a rehabilitation technique we did at university to help during the rehabilitation process, but actually within training, it's a way of helping someone connect better, because it's a touch, it's a sensory thing. But if you've got a bigger pump in that muscle, when you then move to your working sets, you will have a better connection. So I suppose that's answering Sam's first bit of the question. And then he sort of says to straight logbook. So I'm presuming that is what I was saying earlier, where we were a low volume approach, not particularly push-pull legs. It was a body part split where we were focusing on the areas that we needed to bring up, but it was very much working up to a straight set, a back up set, or two straight sets, a back up set, or just a straight set, depending on what we needed. Whereas now what I've done is, and without waffling too much, is, and I like to do this with not all clients, but a lot, particularly ones I've worked with for prolonged periods of time, is post-show, and this is a John Minos sort of thing, this, so it's certainly not my own, nothing is any of our own information, do you know what I mean? Is, my opinion is, your body is battered from prep. You've been dehydrated, you've been very lean, your tendons, your ligaments have taken a beating. Trying to come out of your show, whether you rebound or whatnot, and whether we've discussed, trying to hammer a progressive approach, him hitting your logbook, putting more stress and more grief on your tendons and your joints and whatnot, is just a stupid approach. I do believe that, and I always refer this to clients and everybody else when I speak, is that the whole focus around adaptation is novel stimulus. It's forcing your body to deal with something new. It's just science. So why would you be married to just one style of training, when the fact is, when hypertrophy is studied scientifically, it shows that. So there was a study done, like a review done by Thingy Schofield. What's his name? I always forget his name. Brad.
Yeah,
Brad something. Yeah, that's the one, you can pronounce it. And he showed in this review that 9 work sets per muscle group stimulated hypertrophy so much, but 18 sets per muscle group was significantly better than 9. But then they went to 28, and 28 was better, but not significantly better. So we can see there that more volume works. So, but, and they, although they said they trained to failure, you've got to bear in mind that wherever that study was placed, it wasn't done on bodybuilders, it wasn't done on powerlifters. So their failure is probably what we would class as a very hard working set where we're doing more volume in reality. So if we know that more volume works, then we should be at one point utilizing more volume, and not just all-out failure, hammering the same nail is the way I would describe it. So then you look at, right, well, if we know volume works, and we know that there's a benefit of having pump work in there, and we know the logbook works, then you pick the type of training that fits the environment you're in. So when you were trying to preserve muscle and you don't want to be burning loads of calories in training, it would make sense to keep the lower volume approach that you may have used in the off season. But then coming out of prep where your body is bad, fatigue, you've dropped fatigue, whatnot, your joints have been battered for 16 weeks in prep. They've been battered in the off season that you were smashing before that. If there is a scientific and factual way, both anecdotally on a bodybuilding stage at every level and in science, that volume to what they would call normal failure, and there's many bodybuilders that don't train failure that have got way better physiques than us three put together, and most people listening, right, that will 100% say, and it's been quite popular on a few podcasts lately, I don't go at failure, I don't go at failure, I don't go at failure. So we know it all works, we know it works, right? So if I can then take a client and be like, well, there's a way of keeping you fresh and maximising hypertrophy, then let's use that one. Don't keep hammering the same nail. And then from the volume approach, when you've maximised that, or you're sick of it, or you're feeling that you can't get your food any higher, or it's battering your body, or you're just not enjoying it, which is what I'll come round to, then you switch back to low volume. If anybody's just hammering the same nail all of the time, I personally think it's a little bit silly. Now, and again, Deck touched on this, and it's something I'm going to put on my IGTV as well, because it's something I see quite a lot now, and it irritates me a bit, is that you should be having fun, and this is something that we discussed all day Monday and Tuesday. You should be having fun with your training. Even if you are on your ass at 4 weeks out of a show, or if you're poorly as hell, you should be wanting to go to that gym because you fucking love it. You love to train.
100%.
Right? That should be the key focus to this. The reason that we compete, the reason that we take drugs, the reason that we do all of this is because we enjoy the training. If you don't enjoy the training, you shouldn't be fucking doing any of it, personally. But, so therefore, there needs to be an enjoyment factor. And exactly as Deck said, if you enjoy the training you're doing, you will go no matter how bad the weather is, no matter how bad you feel in prep, no matter how shitty life is, because you love to go. It's good for your mental health, and it's certainly good for the progress that we're trying to achieve. So that's a key factor as well. If someone said, if I've got a client or if I hired a coach and I was like, I hate that type of training, and that was the first thing he put it on, he's a moron in my opinion. Because giving someone something that they hate, unless there's apart from a very specific situation, which I'll mention, which is myself, it's stupid. You will not give it your all, you will not enjoy it, and the whole plan will fall on its ass. So I do think that, yes, there's science to show this works, yes, there's science to show that works, yes, there's the right environment where one might work better than the other. There's loads of reasons why we may change what we're doing, but there should never be a reason to change to something you don't enjoy. And the only little tad bit, or whatever you want to call it, that is, I have never gone super high volume, ever. I have always said to myself, there's the anecdotal evidence to show it's there, there's the science to show that upwards of 30 sets is a little bit better, and I've always wanted to, but because I dislike it an awful lot and I get bored, I have said I'm going to do it and fell flat a little bit. So now I am doing very high volume training, or have been. And I don't particularly enjoy it, to be totally honest. I haven't enjoyed much of the sessions. Like, I enjoy the training when there's someone else there, but in general, doing 30 sets on your own fucking sucks, in reality.
I like it.
See, for me, it doesn't. I get halfway through and I'm like, but for me, my focus is not my physique. My focus is my coaching, and it's important for me to try everything. So and there was several factors why I wanted to work with AJ, but one of the reasons was I know he's high volume. And in my opinion, he is a much better coach than me, or he's at a much higher level, shall we say. And he has more experience in those areas than me, and he's trained with Jay Cutler, he's worked with every other coach just above him. So the way my mind was, if I've invested that much money in someone I look to that I feel may know more than me, then I will run it. Well, because when I tried myself, I didn't. So I have been running very high volume, and I can say that without a doubt, I got just as big but leaner. My joints, I'm 36 now. I'm reasonably strong, but my joints hurt when I go heavy all the time. My tendons in my wrists, my knees. I have had no knee pain, no lower back pain, no joint pain since the moment I did it. So in terms of ultimate progress, and then the factor of looking after your body, if I feel better, I look better, I'm making just as much progress as before, then that environment for me on top of learning makes sense. Now, then what I will do as I move forward is I do feel that there's a way I can make that more fun. And it would probably revert back to a combination of the fours program I created before, straight sets. And this is what Dex said, there's a place to mix all of this together. And that's where, if you're working with a coach like me and Riz or me and Dex, I don't just say to these or any client, do that and you have to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
We work together as a team, and their enjoyment and how they know their body better than me. My job is to utilise my knowledge, my experience with their biofeedback for us to create something together. That for me is the key to where you're going. Apart from if it's Sam just has to really shut the fuck up and listen a lot of the time.
You need to tranquilise Sam with like a lot of ketamine, maybe just a silver bullet.
Yeah.
Sam has to do as he's told.
I think a lot of people, where they make a mistake, is they say they're high volume and they say they train like Jay Cutler, but they're not high intensity. Like when I tell you lot, that session we did on legs was very slow for me, because when me and Ed train, we're always in a rush. I always want to get back home to my wife and just chill, right? So we are in and out of 45 minutes. And when you are training that fast, you can't really load. You can't really keep loading the sets. You get what I'm trying to say? When you're hammering it every 1 minute, literally every minute a set, you cannot load it like as heavy as someone who's taking a 5-minute break. People take that into account as well.
I just to touch on what Riz said then, and this is important. So I'm the opposite of Riz. I don't want to get home. I'll spend 2.5, 3 hours in the gym without fail, no problem at all. But it doesn't mean what I do is better than Riz or what Riz does is better than mine. It just suits the way we enjoy training. And like, I trained with a client for the first time yesterday, and you guys are probably going to have similar experiences. And going back to that Brad Schoenfeld, he stated something very similar to this, and I can't remember what it was. And the biggest detriment to us in bodybuilding is putting numbers of reps on sets. Because your muscle doesn't have a brain. It cannot count. All it understands is failure. And when you understand that as a new trainer or a new client of a coach, you'll understand that we have to program rep ranges specifically down to your experience level or your inexperience level. But as you get better at this, you'll understand, and JP's the king of saying this, just get strong across all rep ranges. That's absolutely true, but there's a failure point across all of those rep ranges. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
For me, it's just when people say how many reps you're doing or how many reps am I doing, I kind of want to slap them. It's like I'm just going to go to failure in a rep range of 6 to 10, and then my next one is going to be in a rep range of 10 to 15, and I'm going to go to failure again. Once that muscle is taxed, and then I need to get home and feed it. And it is that simple. I know people want to overcomplicate it. And to go back to what Riz said a second ago about people topping the sports and things like that, and we don't follow it in bodybuilding, there is a reason for that, I believe, and I completely agree with you, Riz. It's this terminology people love to throw around, genetics. The genetic component. You're not him, you can't do that. And it's like, how do you fucking know? Have you been doing this for 15 years? Have you been running grams and grams of gear without any health implications for 15, 20 years? Until you're at that point, you can't decide that. You don't know if you have the genetics. So that's why it kind of roots back to what we're saying. Find out what works for you, rinse it for all it's worth, and then just stay in your own lane. Like, I have so many clients, and he's asked a question, Mark, he's an absolute nightmare. I love the kid to bits, and he will be the first to say he is the most difficult person to coach, because every week he watches a YouTube video, or he goes to Victor Black masterclasses, or he sees what Phil Viz has said, or whoever wants to, and he goes, we do this, can we do this? And I really have to drum into him. The progress you've made so far is as good as it gets. You get nothing more from here. If this isn't for you, go and play tennis. Go and do CrossFit. But you can't apply more drugs. You can't change to a different training program or a different diet, or go into, I don't know, any different type of variation of style of training or dieting or anabolic use that's going to improve any more. So if your coach is telling you that, understand that, rinse for what it's worth, and just be fucking patient until you see the results.
I am a walking example of experimenting all of the time, wanting to try something new, and learning is one of the poorest things you can do for bodybuilding. I'm a walking example, because one of the reasons I'm a reasonably good coach, and one of the reasons why I'm very knowledgeable on all things, and all levels of people come to me for advice, is because over the last 15, 16, 17, 18 years, I have literally spent time testing and running every type of nutritional approach, every type of drug cycle, different types of training, and I love the learning more than I love the bodybuilding. I always have done. I like the geeky stuff. I like to see what happens, and I am the type of person. And this is the reason people ask, is because I will wait. I will know it will be better for my progress in terms of my physique to change there and then, but I will wait so I can get the blood work done or the sperm test done or whatever it is. I want all of the information, but that is something that I enjoy. And after putting a hole in my chest, I accepted that bodybuilding wasn't going to go where I wanted to go, so I would put my focus there. But to completely agree with Deck, it all works, and there is only so much muscle you can add once you get to a point, but you have to just be doing the same shit over and over again. So I've been working with Riz 5, 6, 7 years, Deck 2, 3 years. The foods that and I've been doing this 15 years, the foods that I'm eating now are nowhere fucking different to the foods that I was eating at the start. And I'm still lifting weights in the same way. And I'm still using the same drugs because it's all the same stuff that's there. The trick is, and it's part that I miss, like I said, for experimenting, is just doing the same shit. Rinse and repeat, everybody sees me say. You need to just rinse and repeat, do it a little bit more, a little bit heavier, and you need to keep going. That is the trick. But in terms of training, just to go back there, when you're working with more volume, or if you're working in a shorter time frame between sets, like Wiz was saying, what people sometimes forget, I think, is in terms of hypertrophy, there are several different ways of stimulating. More load, more time under tension, shortening rest periods. There are several different ways. So more reps, more sets, more load, time under tension, so slow negatives, shorter rest periods, longer rest periods. All of this is done is to create a novel stimulus, to force your body to have to adapt, because what you're doing is harder than what you did before. And it's the same in any sports, really.
Yeah.
So, if you were doing a high volume approach, and you may be taking short rest periods like this, yes, the load is going to be less, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get the same growth, because as what Dex says, as long as your body is hitting failure, as long as it is completely failing and it is being worked with hard sets, you will progress. So whether that is a set of 20 or 30 or a set of 8 or 10, on paper you will progress. And in reality we see that there is only, and Jordan posted some of this in the day, there is then the argument that, and it's funny, I've always been a fan of higher rep sets. When me and Jordan used to train quite regularly, he would not do them. Now he's a huge proponent. And it's just because everybody progresses to see what works and what not. And the way Jordan described it the other day, which I think is a great way, it's more about, and I've seen Ben Pakalski say this, and it's very scientific, it's about the hard reps that lead up to failure. How many is there? So if you're doing a set of 8, right, in reality, the first 3 or 4, 5 sets, yes, they're hard, obvious reps, yes, they're hard, but they're not irking them out, they're not grinding them out. When we did a back off set on legs on Tuesday, we did a back off of 20 plus reps, and we had forced reps and we had rest pauses, but we managed to get an extra 6 or 7 reps. So that means that we were probably working with effective reps from rep 10, and we had 10 effective reps. And to better this example, before that I'd gone too heavy and I got a set of 7 or 6. One was forced, I think. So the first 3 were hard, and then all of a sudden it was too heavy. So even if all of those reps were effective, that was only 7 reps. I still got more effective reps from the back off, and my lower back didn't hurt anywhere near as much as it did from the 20 repper as it did from the 7. And to add to that, when I got off the 7, there was a bit of pain in my knees, there was a little bit of a bump, there was pain in my lower back. When I got off that set of 20, I couldn't walk because my legs were so pumped. There was not much knee pain, not much back pain. So if we just use, and I'm a huge, as I'll continue to say it all of the time, huge proponent in using a bit of common sense. If we know we need to hit failure, if we know we need to protect our joints to some extent, if we know that we need to be training hard, I do not, and I did this for a long time, working a set of 8, working rep range of 8, you've got to squat because everybody says that's what big legs, you've got to do hack squat. I've got past the point of doing shit that hurts. If that 7 rep had just ruined my knees and ruined my lower back, and the pump wasn't as good, and then I did a set of 20 to complete failure, and so it's got just as many effective reps, and there was no knee pain, no back pain, and the pump is better, I would sit there and argue till I was blue in the face that surely the higher rep range is more effective in every fucking area. Has to be, for me.
I think what we're trying to tell people is the main thing as well is you have to just go to the gym and do what suits you. If that means doing half your session logbook and then half it pump workout like I used to, then do that. Do high reps, do low reps, do everything, man. Just smash it. Just don't do none of that reps in reserve bollocks, aka regress training, aka dog shit training. Jordan Peters will say the same thing. It's regress training. So will Dan Bastic. This dog shit training. That's the only training style I do not agree with. That's that reps in reserve bollocks.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me at all, the reps and reserve training. It's a really difficult one to navigate, and I think that's where it can get overcomplicated, like JP, and I think people just start showing frustration very, very easily.
I think I read into it for a while because I like one of the guys that's into it. He's a very clever guy and I like the way he speaks. But I think the problem is, it's from what I've gathered, it seems to be based on quite beginners, intermediates. And they are actually the worst people that should be using it because they have no idea what a rep in reserve. They have no idea where 2 reps are because they don't know what failure is.
They don't know what failure is, yeah.
No. And then I also think by the time you get advanced, if you would try, I don't see how we could be under that leg press, right? Whether it was the 7 set, whether it was the 7 reps or the 20, and would know. How could I even acknowledge in my brain where I need to be? And I know they like to work out the numbers and all that shit. But as soon as I'm working out numbers, I'm not going to the gym. It's already spoiled for me there anyway. But I just think, and I did try it, but it was ruining my set because I was trying to sort of work out: is this 2 reps in reserve? Is this 1 reps in reserve? And by the time, and in the end, it was just spoiling the set. And I generally just think that you shouldn't. If you're working out in the set, and I suppose this is where I might not know a lot about it, if you're trying to gauge during the set, then I think that it will ruin the end of your set. I generally think that's a huge negative. I think if we've got 500, 450, 500 kilo on a leg press, and you were at rep 7, 8, 9 or 10, and you were trying to think, is this 1 rep in reserve, is this 2? I think you're either going to hurt yourself or you're going to fluff the set, and probably hurt yourself also.
My watch is showing me a relaxed reminder when we're talking about reps and reserve. I get too angry.
I tell you what, I can leave a little bit of advice, not advice, it's something I used to work at a manufacturing company, and one of the bosses was a chap called Mike Warner, who was like a multiple-time NABA champion, and PCA, I believe, only a small Welsh guy. And he collared me on the way past because there was a gym in the factory, and he was based like, bang on the gear, you've got good genetics, all this sort of stuff. But he said something to me that has stuck with me from day one, and it always rings true in my brain. I believe it's kind of why I kind of hit the ground running pretty well in the gym. He said to me, it is a stigma in bodybuilding when you're trying to build muscle. The person who is the best is the person that will take a 50k dumbbell and do 100 reps. But ultimately, the person who's the best in the gym is you can take that 50k dumbbell and fail the fastest. And when you listen to all the people with serious muscle, take Ramy as the example. When Milos were talking about him, watching him train in Benus, they said you could put a single plate on the hack squat and he would fail at 7 reps. He could do the same with 4 plates, 5 plates, 6 plates. Once you have the ability to do that with the muscle, the numbers kind of become redundant. And then once you understand that concept, it's just applying that to what you enjoy.
Yeah.
Reps in reserve. I'm trying to word this in a nice way.
Go fucking nuts, Riz. I know what you want to say, bud. Smash the room up.
Reps in reserve, yeah, is like banging your missus, yeah. And then when it's just about to happen, you say, you know what, leave it, I can't do no more. I'm all out, I'm finished. Or it's like racing a fucking car. It's like racing a car, you smoke them in 4th, and you're like, you know what, I'll leave them. Now you drop it into 5th, you destroy it, right? In my opinion, reps in reserve is just this made up pussy boy training style that the UK guys are preaching a lot to make themselves sound clever all the fucking time. Idiots.
I don't want to like drill down too hard on that, is like the reps in reserve specifically, but I think anyone who has experience in business away from bodybuilding, forget this industry, that we call it sending a narrative one way and pulling it back the other. Yeah, and you'll see this throughout the industry, and this is a little bit of advice to people. As an example, I work in the insurance industry. We are increasing our capacity, if you like, of electric vehicles. So before we do that, what we would do is do endless marketing of how good electric vehicles are. Yeah. Once that is done and it's common knowledge, we then put our products out and people buy it because they've seen all of this marketing. Yeah. And it's the same thing with these reps and reserves and these different theories that you repeatedly hear regurgitated by different people in different ways. All they're doing is they're creating a narrative for them to market to you. Now, I don't want to slate anybody, but I use this as a fantastic example, and I know he's a genius and very well respected. But if we take John Jewett as an example, and this is it's always one that sticks in my brain. If we go back 18 months ago, it was detrimental to go any more than 10 pounds over stage weight. If you skip, you can't grow muscle. It doesn't work. You're not getting anything from it. You're just flat fat. You're reducing your ability to grow muscle. And now if you look at him this year, and this isn't a knock on him because he holds his hands up and says, I was wrong. He's now extremely soft, heavier than he's ever been, stronger than he's ever been, and growing more muscle than he ever has. And
he's probably going to make some progress this year too.
Well, exactly. But it's not to say that, and I just want people to understand if they listen to this, it's just take this as the advice. Like, take what people are saying, digest it, and interpret it in your own way. And people will change their ideas or their narratives or their types of training. It doesn't mean they were wrong once. It just means they learn. So it kind of all goes back to what we're saying. Learn what works for you, then fucking stick to it. Do you know what I mean? Don't just follow what someone says because next year they'll completely disagree.
And fuck what anyone else says. Just do what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Ketamine.
Right.
Ketamine.
Yeah.
MDMA.
THC.
Yeah, this is gummies.
I don't do them.
Should we work through questions?
I've got some open here.
There's a really good question I think Hilly should start on because he touched on it a minute ago, and it's from one of my clients. And I'd like Hilly to answer it first, only because it's what he enjoys. And it's from my client, Mark Heats. It says, how much science is too much science? Deck knows where my head at here. I'm sucking the fun out of bodybuilding. I'll also take a physique rating. Obviously, we can't do that at the moment, guys, because we can't share the screen. But what are your thoughts on that, Hilly? Is there too much science?
At this current moment in time, for me, there is way too much science in some areas, particularly on Instagram. I've been at this 15, 16, 17 years, and like I say, I'm a huge fan of the science, but not the nitty gritty, how many carbon atoms are in this and all that sort of shit. I like to look at this, and again, I've studied at uni for a long time, so I understand reading, literature and whatnot. I like to know what hypothesis in a study when they've been looking at drugs. I like to know what the outcome was. I like to know what the reasoning was. I don't like to know the inside out of a fad, and I don't think that we need to know it. Now, if you then enjoy that side of it, that is fine. But, and I'll talk through just myself because I'm the perfect example for it. When I was at uni, I went far too much into the science side of things. I was studying sports therapy, studying sports nutrition. At one point, I was taking not just branching amino acids, which I did my dissertation on, not just amino acids. I was buying the individual amino acids and taking them at different times. Then I was taking GHRP6 at different times and the GRF at different times. And then I was taking 1 IU of GH every 5 hours and every 3 hours. And like, at one point I was just like, oh, I'm just going to stop taking all of these amino acids and all of this. And I didn't really see much of a difference. And then I hired a guy, Phil Hernan, who's an unbelievable American bodybuilder. Not a great coach in my opinion, but he was a big believer in doing liquid beef aminos in between meals. So you would eat a meal, an hour and a half later you would do the liquid beef aminos, then you would do a meal. So and these things I stuck at for months because I like the science. Didn't see a blind bit of difference in my opinion. And when it comes to the same with the drugs, I think in this day and age where this question's probably come from is there is a lot of people with little experience, and there's some quite high up coaches that don't actually have that much real world experience, but they've read a shitload of textbooks, and then you're just regurgitating the science as a selling point, which is going back to what Deck was touching on. And it sounds really clever and it sounds really good, and everybody's like, well, he knows all of this and she knows all of this. And what they're talking about is what they have read in a book. So some of these guys I know for a fact haven't even done the things I've seen them suggest do. And there is a big difference between what you read in a textbook, which is not even a study. It is just the scientific jargon. And then what really is needed or happens in real life. And then there's a real life picture that really needs to be taken in consideration. And I think when you've tried things yourself, when you've done the extremes of everything, then when you've had clients say, Hilly, I saw you experiment with this thing 10 years ago. Can you do the same experiment with me? And then you've done it with them and you've seen yourself and them and the real world application and actually how the science didn't pan out. it wasn't applicable for this, or it was abolic for this. You get an understanding that a lot of it is just too much. And like I say, the amount of peptides I would into different amino acids, I've gone to the ends of the earth with stuff. And yes, I enjoyed the experiments. Yes, I enjoyed the learning, but there was a lot of it that had no real benefit. And I think maybe this is coming away from this question or not, but a prime example of this is I've seen some people out there that recommend that females, and this is even bikini athletes, should not be taking Anabar, but they should be taking injectable L-carnitine, metformin, growth hormone, insulin, something else, all chemicals, right? 2 or 3 of those need injecting instead of taking 5 milligram of Anabar, because in all of these textbooks, compared to one textbook, that might make more sense. And I think, well, if you read all of the textbook, yes, but asking a female bikini girl or whatever, and really just to touch on that, most bikini girls, if not all, shouldn't be taking Anabar anyway, or any of these drugs really. That's the idea of the class, but it's a different conversation, because there's many people want to use. Saying to someone, actually take 4 tablets and inject yourself twice a day, or just taking half a tablet once a day, that many people have done, fine. I think that's where you're getting lost in the science, and that person must have no real world application, because asking a younger female potentially, to inject themselves 2 or 3 times a day, 2-3 times a day, and take all these tablets, are they going to want to do that? Is the psychology, do they have any psychological understanding? Do they know how that's going to linger later on? I think that is a prime example for me, how you can very much get lost in the science. Fantastically lost. And that's the same for blokes as well. You know, I've run some weird cycles, but I've seen some stuff put together that's like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 50. And actually, in fact, I'm like, every big bodybuilder that you know on the planet has never done something so complicated in its life. So why is some 12-stone bloke or 13-stone bloke making you do all of this complicated shit when he's never been any higher than 14 or 15 stone or whatever? These are just examples.
I'm 13 stone.
Hey,
be
Riz,
careful.
he's digging you out here, bud.
I'm 13 stone.
And like just again the common sense factor, which I'm a huge thing of. Listen to the people that've done it for a long time, maybe made the errors. But if all of these big, huge blokes that we all aspire to watch on YouTube, if they've never done anything that stupidly complicated or scientific, then why are these people on YouTube or Instagram that have never been that size and don't work with anybody that size telling people to do this over? And they're the ones that are spouting all of the science. So I've worked with 2. I've worked with Scott Stevenson, who is arguably the cleverest person in bodybuilding.
Yep.
And I'm currently working with AJ, who I would say is a very, very educated man, very clever on all aspects. And they don't do this complicated stuff. And they are not, I know Scott Stevenson is very clever, but the way they work, they are not spouting loads of science at you. They're not having you using 10 million different things. Their stuff is basic, what people have been doing for decades.
You know when
Because
someone's actually clever, they can explain something in a sentence. And when someone is stupid, it takes about 20 sentences to explain the same thing. It's like school children, it's the same thing. Do you know what I mean?
Child, yeah. 100%.
Exactly. Well, we were talking about this. One thing that I am reasonably good at, if I've got the knowledge on it, is I can explain something. So that, and I get a lot of comments on my Instagram videos on this. I can explain things, and I like to explain things to people so they can take the information and use it. That is the whole idea of a coach. That is the whole idea of an educator. You know, we're not lecturers at university. We're not school teachers. We're not trying to get you to understand the nitty-gritty. What we are doing is trying to get you to understand why something's being used and what it does. And the application of it, the process of it. If you want to know the inside and out of an atom or whatnot, then listening to some guy on Instagram that's a bodybuilding coach is not the person to speak to. You need to be at university, because there's different levels of that sort of studying. But none of those university lecturers have built any remarkable amounts of muscle, because that's not what they're about. And that there has to be a clear-cut definition of, well, do I need to know what that looks like in its chemical form? Or do I just need to know that it does this? And what does that do to my body, and how will I progress using it? Or does it not need using? And I think there is, like I say, I'm a walking example of getting lost in way too much science shit, and I said this earlier, too much experiment. I just think it's more popular than ever at the moment. Yes, because we have access to so much information, but because people with less experience and with less practical applications, or they don't have the physique to show off, so they want to spout the science so that they have something to talk about, And so people think, well, they must know what they're talking about because they know all the clever shit. No, actually, the people that know what they're talking about look how you want to look or have done in the past or have helped people get there early doors.
Do you know what I've realised as well over time? Do you know last year was a good year? You know why? I just jabbed, ate, went to the gym. I didn't really look into the science. I was eating, what do I eat? And you were like, X, Y, Z. I was like, what about this? You're like, okay, cool. And we just went with it like that. Even this year, we're just going with it. I'm not like, can I do this? Can't hit the HGH 3 times a day. Can we split it? I just going with it. People overcomplicate it, and then it becomes a science game. It don't become.
To add to what you said there, Dick, with your client is, I think one of the things that I see wrong with people who get coached these days is they watch too much stuff that's going on with other people. And then they ask their coach, is it possible to do it? They want to know why they want things changing. And it's something I've contemplated putting a video on, but I haven't. When I've gone to work with AJ, I am hiring him because I want to learn what he does. I want his experience, I want his knowledge, and I want to see what he does with my physique. I have not once in 9 months asked him to change any of my meals. Or I don't like that. Like, as long as there's no foods on there I hate, but there's certainly, I wouldn't be eating beef and eggs all day, I have a choice. But he feels that the nutritional plan he gave me, in his experience, which is a fucking lot, will work best. The drug protocols, there is some stuff that I don't agree with, or I wouldn't do, but there's a lot that I do, but not once have I had an issue with it, not once have I questioned it, because again, I have hired him to get his experience and him tell me what to do. Same with training. What would be the point in me hiring him and then going, oh, but I was listening to this YouTube, they're doing this. And the problem when people do that is sometimes the coach might feel, do you know what it is? If they're not happy doing what I've said, just go and do that. So then you're not getting the best out of the coach. Or secondly, they might feel, wow, might that work better if they're a little bit less experienced? Is that the in thing? Are they doing better? Should I? And you're instantly spoiling what you actually went there for. If someone has hired Riz, if someone has hired Deck, if I've hired AJ, I am hiring them because I need or want them to tell me what they think is best in their opinion. If you don't want the best out of them, don't hire them. Hire whoever you listen to on YouTube. You can't expect the coach, any coach, to know what everybody else is doing. You should have looked at their results. You should have heard them speak, seen them post on forums. You should be thinking, well, I really like the way they talk. I really like the way they approach things. They've got a really good client base, results. Reached out to the clients. Please, will you work with me? You tell me what to do, I will do it. Not after 10 weeks. Oh, this guy that sounds really clever on Instagram, he's got loads of followers. He's spouted this off there. Can I try that? It's pointless, in my opinion. Pointless.
I think some people are simply not coachable, right? Some people, they need to just work by themselves. They need to ask 100 people their things, and they just create this little plan of yo-yo bollocks, and they look the same, but that's what's right for some people, and that makes them happy. That's fine. Not everyone needs to work with a coach. Some people, they just can't do it. They just can't do it.
That's the funny thing with Mark. Like, Mark is coachable, but I know he's had, let's say, not great experience with previous coaches, but I think where some people fit certain coaches, I literally say, Mark, shut the fuck up, you're being stupid. This is why. Here's the science. I can articulate the science back to you. This is why, but this is why it's stupid. But I just want to summarize Mark's question from my perspective very, very easily and quickly. If you enjoy the science, that's fine. If you are using science to find a shortcut, it doesn't fucking exist. Work harder. And that's the easiest way I can approach it to everybody, is if you enjoy the science and that's what gets you to tick, you carry on doing that because that'll help you stick to the gym, it'll keep you progressing. However, if you don't actually enjoy the science and you're just looking for faster routes, shortcuts, or an easier route from A to B, it doesn't exist, you're not going to get there, and all you're going to do is spin your wheels.
Got another question. Let's jump on the next question.
What about Hamish's?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's do Hamish's. Number one, I just want to say I competed with Hamish at the first timers, and the kid's progress has been absolutely ludicrous. So props to him. His Instagram is Hamish Maguire _ if you want to go and have a look, but the kid has put some serious muscle on.
Him and Kuba have really smashed it. Fantastic progress. Yeah.
He's very good. I'm looking at his pictures now.
Yeah.
also really comes into his own when he's lean. Like, and he won't mind me saying this because I think he called himself burger tits to me. But when he's lean, he really comes in like he really looks very, very good, very competitive these days.
Some people under the stage lights, I don't know, I call them, they're like these bodybuilders who don't look good in the gym, but under the stage light, everything goes and it just pops and they look brilliant.
It's when they're
He's
next
one of
to
them
you, I
guys.
think. When you have a scale next to someone, I think that's when you really grasp someone's size and their muscularity. I think when you're on the ring,
Yes.
you can either look very big or very small. It's never really in between.
So the first part is Primo bowling versus Masteron. Use cases and personal experiences. So for me, there's a lot of people say Primo and Master are interchangeable, and they are to a point. I suppose your first thing is use what you can get afford that you know is real, first and foremost with all drugs. But I do feel at the moment getting hold of Primo is not hard like it used to be. So the easiest distinction between these two for me is I find Masteron is stronger in 95% of people as an anti-estrogen. So it will control your estrogen levels better in most people than Primo bowling. Now there does seem to be some people who are an anomaly, and they seem to get a stronger AI effect from Primo than Master. But in general, for me, Masteron works better. So if I've got someone in a dieting phase, if I've got someone in prep, then I would likely favour Masteron over Primo. Now, and add on to that is if you were looking to run potentially test and deca in your off season, then you want to control estrogen, ideally using no AI. So here, Masteron would be very beneficial because it works better than Primo. The other advantage to Masteron for me in some areas is Masteron, and I've checked this on my blood work and some others, seems to have a positive effect on free testosterone. So I find that Masteron with test makes the testosterone more effective. I also call test and mast like my favourite well-being cycle or feel-good cycle. Once you get the ratios right, and I like to use it for lifestyle clients that like to use AS, you get the ratios right, and it's a bit different for everybody. You will feel good and you will look good on Masteron. Without a shot with test and mast, it is a very good drug. It's not harsh on your lipids, in my experience, obviously depending on the dose. Works very well. Where I would opt for Primo over Mast is it's better at nitrogen retention. It has the potential to create more muscle, in my experience, and on paper per se. So if one is in an off season, then you may favour, and you don't have estrogen issues, then you may favour Primo over Masteron. The other thing is, Masteron has a positive effect on your central nervous system, I believe, and I'm not going to try them off at the sides because I don't understand it too much, but it will work on your neural pathways better. So it will help you in the gym. If you're a performance athlete, it may help you in terms of your movements, your movement patterns. So say you're an Olympic lifter, a power lifter, you are a fighter, a boxer, anything like that, it may make your movement patterns better. So it has benefit there. So as you can see, and this is with all drugs, you need to look at the mechanisms and also the benefits they bring, and then choose them for your cycle. So depending on what you were trying to get, you may use a mixture of both. And I know many people are a fan of using a mixture of both, and I am with some. So say you've got someone that is quite estrogen sensitive, gets gyno, gets whatever, holds a lot of water, you've checked it on blood work, but you are still trying to grow. You may then say, right, well, I want to use a bit of MPP, DECA, because it's a stronger anabolic, but they're very E2 sensitive. So I want some Masteron in there, but I want to keep the test down, again, due to E2. So we'll make a combination and we'll use test, Primo, Mast, and MPP. And by balancing the ratios, you should be able to control the estrogen better. So it's really about, for me, it's about looking at what the drugs do and not just what I say they do, because, again, we will all react differently to them. So finding out what they work for you best at, what properties you want from the drug, and then picking the drugs that you want in the amounts that you need. I think that's not too much waffle.
No, that's spot on. Rich, do you want to go? Brown people can go first now.
I'm disagreeing with Hilly a little bit, not just on the point that you made about, I'm not disagreeing, I don't want to piss him off, but if I could just say it. So let's just say you got someone who's got high estrogen, right? And they're on a 500 test, hypothetically, right? and I'm now going to put in 500 Mast, 500 Primo to control the estrogen. I might as well just use half Remedex. This is where...
Yeah, but that's a different point, that, though.
I know,
I agree with you
but
there.
do you get what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are using it. A lot of people are using it to get rid of estrogen when they can just use one other compound instead. That's just one of my things that really pisses me off.
Yeah.
Pet hate,
But
was it? Pet hate.
It's a pet hate, right? But getting back to it, Primo vs Masteron. To be honest with you, every time I've been told to use Primo, I get angry because it's 100 milligram per mil. If I want to run that 1,000 mil, that's 10 mil, and it is literally a pain in everywhere, right? Masteron comes in at 200 milligram per mil. It's easier to pin. So like Hilly said earlier on about what's realistic, is it more realistic to get 2 gram of Masteron in? Equivalent to getting 2 gram of Primo, and just purely for number reasons, right? That's a lot of oil. And there's the more you jab, the bigger risk of getting infection as well.
That's that common sense factor coming in, and it relates to the AI that you said was like, yes, is Primo slightly better? Is it not? Can you afford to be, if you were trying to use a higher dose of Primo because you needed to control estrogen, can you afford, is that affordability justifiable? Is it needed? Will you get just as much from using, there's all of, I think when you're working with, when you're designing something for yourself or when you're working with clients, you have to factor in, can someone afford, or do they want to be pinning 5 mil of Primo a week when they can just pin 2 mil of Masteron?
But
But from a funds perspective, from an oil perspective, and this when it comes down to who are you working with, what are they wanting to do, what are you willing to do individually? I imagine Hamish is wanting to maximise every aspect possible because he's right into it. So therefore, this would be more relevant, whereas for a lot of people it wouldn't. So that's where it's person dependent.
I think, me and Deck discussed this on the way back from our long drive from yours.
Longer drive for me, but a long drive for you.
Some people are using, they're both great compounds, right? They're both got their, I would favour Masteron. Most of my clients use Masteron when I like to use that compound, right? Very few use Primo. I don't like it. I think it's too expensive for a lot of people for what you get. In my opinion, some guys are using a gram of Primo, which is a lot of money, right? Per week. Some guys are even running 2 grams of Primo per week. If you've got that much money, then why not just use 10 IUs of growth every day instead? That's what me and Deck were trying to say. If you've got that much money, stop wasting your money on the Primo and just use way more growth. You'll get way more, in my opinion, you'll get way more benefit. And it's way less jabbing.
I think, and I'm with Hilly on this. Like, I actually don't think they're comparable. Yes, I know they're both DHT derivatives, but again, Tren and MPP are not comparable either. And I think this has become a bit of a common topic at the moment because I think people see the pathways, they're comparable, they both control E2, and they're the same. I know Hilly touched on this, but just from like the nitrogen retention benefit, like they are not comparable in any way, and I would use them for completely different purposes. For myself, and I will just speak on myself rather than my clients, and I'll keep that going forward with everything just in my own experiences rather than what I would do for somebody else, because I'm way more experimental with myself, obviously with Hilly guidance, than I am with my actual own clients. So I don't like MPP. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I don't like the water that I hold on it. I'm willing 100% of the time to sacrifice the 10-15% or the greater anabolism or the anabolic benefits from MPP to stick to Primo 100% of the time. Now, Masteron controls E2 better for me, way better than Primo. But like I said, I would favour the Mast at all times instead of using an AI. So that's what I use that for, is to control estrogen, as I do like to run higher tests, which I have no problem in saying. So like Hilly said, I almost use Test and Masteron, and I'm going to be very bro science when I say this, as the same compound, because I use them at the exact same time. I use one with the other in tangent to make sure that my E2 is controlled at all times. So that's like the base of any cycle that I design for myself, which I do, as Hilly knows, I design my own cycle this time around on this push-up because I want to try something a little bit different. And then from there, I'll add something that's more tissue selective as an example with Primobolan, and from a 19 Nor standpoint, or that pathway, as people, or cascade as people like to say, I'll always favour a small, and I mean a very small amount of Tren, in the off season over MPP. But like I said, I don't think they're comparable. I think people use it as a cost excuse. They're both DHT derivatives. One's very cheap, one's expensive. You can just switch to Masteron. And I just think in the real world benefit side of it, I think Primo Bodybuilding is far superior in terms of growing muscle, and it's what I favour for my clients.
The only other thing that I would say is if you had another option, I would personally not use either of them in a growing phase. If E2 was a problem and you wanted to add a compound that was going to help, I personally would favour EQ over both of them. I'm not talking from a health perspective or any of that. I'm talking purely from a muscle building standpoint, right? It's the bodybuilding podcast. I would use EQ because in me myself, I'm a very high estrogen guy, right? And me and Haley have done multiple different tests. And when I use EQ, I can use test and MPP at high dosages and I don't get any gyno or hardly any aromatization side effects. And the bloods always come back very, very good. So I'm only going by my own standpoint. I know guys are ripping EQ at the moment, but it's a compound that's been used for many, many years very, very successfully as well.
Going back to the AI point, Riz, and this isn't to disagree with you, but I also think sometimes we kind of come away from understanding like what we're all trying to do here. Like science is one thing, but if we look at like the AI option, and like you said, 500 milligram of test, 500 milligram of Masteron, 500 milligram of Primo, that extra 1,000 milligrams of gear is gonna pay dividends in terms of muscle over an AI. So
yeah, of course.
And again, that goes back to that total androgen load, and I think that's where like the stack design, which I think we'll cover completely on a separate podcast about how we design things and what we favour and stuff. But I think ultimately the goal is to get as much volume as possible of anabolics in our system with as least detriment to our health. Like that is the overall goal. And I think that's where using those compounds specifically, like Masteron and Primo with testosterone, kind of come into their own. But I also agree, Riz, and this is a very new thing for me, and it came from one of the powerlifting groups that I'm in, that they absolutely love equipoise for controlling estrogen. And me and Hilly experimented with myself and a couple of other clients, and it is, in my opinion, far superior at controlling estrogen than Masteron. Far, far superior.
Yeah, and I've had this discussion with people this year for whatever the negative image that EQ has for some reason at the moment, and I won't go down to why it's got to in the waffle there, but again it's just using common sense and some science, right? So I have seen it in blood work multiple times. I've always used equipoise with people or when it's needed. Equipoise, it seems for all, has a very, very, very strong AI effect. Very strong AI effect. So when you again are looking at your cycle design, if you've got someone like Chris who aromatizes quite heavily, if your blood work shows that they do not have a red blood cell count issue, they don't have thicker blood, then using equipoise to control E2 makes sense. It's cheaper than the test of the Masteron. It comes in a higher volume. It has anabolic properties. And the funny thing is this big thing about it thickening blood. Having your red blood cell count and your hemoglobin and hemocratic at the top end of normal means you have more red blood cells. That means you can get more oxygen out of your body, more nutrients, blah blah blah. It is made for improving. It is made. There's properties there. It's not made for. Sorry, it's a veterinary drug, but those properties are all there. They're made to help us build more muscle, and on top of that, it controls E2 very well. So it's a perfect bodybuilding drug. Hence, it's being used across the board for decades and decades and decades. Now, again, this is where it comes down to common sense. If you run it, or if you've done blood work and you have thicker blood, then that is not a drug for you. If you then run it and you see that your red blood cell count, your hemoglobin and whatnot has gone up, you can then decide, right, well, I need to look at Masteron or Primo, and I need to look at, or maybe I need an AI. I'm one of those people. But for the majority of people, I've run EQ several times. Not once has my blood ever been thick. Not once. So for me, if I want to run a cycle that maximizes growth, where I know aromatization will be high, why would I opt to spend the money on Primo Boredom if it doesn't need to be there to control estrogen? Why would I spend the money on Masteron to control estrogen if I can use equipoise. And yes, all of these drugs will bring different purposes. So again, this comes down to stack design, which we'll cover in a step later. A little bit of equipoise somewhere, or a lower dose, 200 or 300 milligrams, for a particular cycle design, for a particular person, could be the best thing. For someone, it could not. And like I said, when me and Dec discussed using a high testosterone cycle for himself, one of the reasons we used EQ was so he could use more testosterone. And that allowed him to do so, and it allowed him to have potentially the most productive cycle he's ever had. And the equipoise was there to allow us to run more testosterone. Guess what? To allow us to build more fucking muscle, because that's the purpose of the drug we used. His blood work was fine. He hasn't had a need to let blood. His kidneys were fine. His liver was fine. So therefore, that combination of drugs served their purpose, and they worked very well. If you have someone else and it doesn't, then it doesn't. But and this is just a random point. People saying that we shouldn't use this drug or we shouldn't use that. The fact of the matter is, none of us should be using any of these fucking drugs. Because they're not medically purposeful.
They're all banned except for test.
Well, it's just it's so stupid for someone to say, well, I've done a study here and these rabbits had bad kidneys, or these fucking, I don't know, giraffes had bad livers. It's like, well, I've never seen anybody's blood work be bad off equipoise. Now, if I did, then you can be damn sure they wouldn't be running it. But that doesn't mean us three here shouldn't be running it, because we've never had that issue.
It's an example, because Dec just there said he doesn't like MPP. When I'm on the other hand, I love MPP. So it shows you everyone's body responds differently, right?
And me too. I'm a huge NPP proponent. I don't like Deca at all. And I can't possibly tell you why I feel bad on Deca and I feel great on MPP. But I'm a big proponent of MPP for adding muscle mass. I like to run it a certain way, especially with everybody. I feel it's better with low testosterone, higher MPP. And there's a little additional tidbit. Years and years and years ago, there was two very clever blokes I knew on a bodybuilding forum in America, and they were adamant that running Masteron with Deca seems to alleviate some of the psychological benefits from the Deca, the negative side effects people get. So I'm a huge fan of running higher MPP cycles, lower test, and some Masteron in. And I've run that with several clients over the years. It is a fantastic growing cycle. But if you don't get on well with MPP, then it's not a fucking great cycle for you. The same as with equipoise. If you don't get on with it, and some people get terrible anxiety and they feel bad on it, you have to ignore people waffling studies. You have to look at the common sense of. I mean, I do believe a very well-known American bodybuilder just come out and said how stupid all of these people are from running high-dose Primo cycles. They're not putting on that much muscle, and everybody should be using test Deca and equipoise, more or less. Like, those are the drugs that everybody you look at on YouTube channels for the last 10 decades have used. Is there better ways? Honestly, I don't believe so. Is there healthier ways? They may be. But guess what? In my honest opinion, those healthier ways are not building you as much fucking muscle. And yes, we should all be about health. But for those at our levels where we're not using grams and grams and grams of gear, I don't think it matters too much.
No. On paper... Go on, sorry, Dec, go on.
No, Karen, where'd you go?
No, you go first, bro. Why
I was just going to say, to keep it on trend or on the same topic, it's like I said about our training in my philosophies. I now know what works for me. It took me and Hilly the best part of 4 or 5 blasts, and it did. Like, we went through all the anabolics. Now, I know what works for me, which within the industry at the moment is being demonized, but I'm not going to fucking listen to what anyone's saying. I know what works for me. I know how it saves my blood work. So now all it is for me and Hilly, the only thing we play with now going forward is food. Like, that's it. Training's done. Anabolics are done. We don't need to escalate. We might get a bit experimental at some time, but dosage is already high enough for someone of my muscularity and body weight. So all it is now, as we always say on all of our Instagrams, it's just a case of rinse and repeat. There is no influencer or coach that is going to say something about any of the compounds that I have from my own anecdotal experience and evidence now that will change how I will continue going forward. And you might call that narrow-minded or being a meathead, but I also believe it's one of the reasons why, without blowing smoke up my own ass, why I've made so much progress so quickly.
More than most people have.
I'm literally just head down in my own lane, and I don't need to listen to what you tell me until you can physically show me how it benefits me. I won't change.
And a good thing to note there, what you just said, Dec, is and this is something that I like to do with clients that are like Riz and Dec, that are in this for the long haul and that want to excel their physique drastically. You should be trying these different compounds. You should be checking your blood work. You should be making notes. So and that takes a bit of time, but if you do it early doors, and you don't listen to fads, and you make notes, and you speak to people that know what they're talking about, both scientifically and anecdotally, you will have then a list. This makes me feel good. This makes me look good. This makes me progress well. This makes me feel like dog shit. This doesn't help progress. And then you just stick to the list that makes you feel good and fucking look good. And you ignore the other list. And if you get that done straight away, then the rest of your career will continue to excel. If you don't, and you jump from trend to trend, and you don't make notes, and you don't do blood work, then you are never going to know what works for you. And if you don't know what works best for you, you will always be a little lost.
And I think a lot of people, people make this mistake here is they'll hear what Hilly said, hear what Dex said, hear what I've said, but they'll Google it. How should equipoise make me feel? How does Deca make me feel? And as soon as they see Deca dick, they're, oh my god, my dick's not working. Oh shit, I've got a headache because I'm on EQ. And people read these things and they make it suit them, and it drives me absolutely mental. And people just need to just take the drugs and see how you feel on it, and be open-minded, because these are drugs that are banned. There's not enough studies to show you how they're going to feel. You've got to try it on yourself and find out. Yeah. That's my honest opinion.
Just the second part of Hamish's question: when to push fats versus carbs in the off season. For me, I've done a sharp turn there, but just to keep us moving a little bit. For me, it's very person dependent. Some people just get on better with higher carbs. Some people get on better with higher fats. Sometimes it's a digestion thing. Sometimes it is just simply how your body works. And this is where it's even more important than ever to make notes. See how you feel. And it is important to get other people's opinions here, in my opinion. Opinion. But again, it's just coming down to making notes. I do like to drive carbs up first, once your fats are at a certain level. Now, this will then depend on if you are male, female, natural, unnatural. If you are natural, you want a higher percentage of your a high percentage of your calories coming from fats early doors, because fats drive hormonal response. It's just science. If you were assisted, then that's not as important. Once you're at 60 or 70 grams a day, you're good. Then it's about what works best for you moving forward in terms of driving them up. Some people just get on better with higher carbs. Other people are better with a 40-40-20 split, or 40-30-30, whatever. It's so person dependent. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. What I find that the important things are, a lot of people suffer with digestive issues if they are trying to get a decent amount of fats on their very high days or higher days. So if those people have digestive issues from that, what I tend to do is have a higher carb days where the fats are lower, a training day when the fats are medium, and then a rest day where the fats are medium to higher. And I think that's a good way of covering it. But I have some clients where they just can't go high fats at all for the digestion. For me personally, I have what's called slow gastric transit. So my digestive system doesn't move food through well. So higher fats, and fats slow your digestion down. So for me, higher fats in general are a no-no. For other people, they're not. So it's an impossible question to say what should drive up first, because I might change that differently for Riz, for Deck, for several different clients.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, like for me, and I think this is where experience comes in from coaching. So Hamish could be speaking about his clients here because I know he coaches as well, or I don't know if he's speaking specifically about himself. I find the difficult part is people enjoy fats. So they make out they feel good on them. And I'm yet to see, in my experience, a real benefit to increasing fats. Like Hilly said, 60, 70 grams of fat for me is optimal, and it's where I stay. The only time, and I mean this, the only time I'll ever increase that is where the carbohydrate ceiling is maxed out. I'll probably even put a little bit more protein in first before fats, because like I said, I know people enjoy them from a satiety standpoint, a little bit of dark chocolate or nut butter, but I'm yet to see a physical benefit or a performance benefit. Anything over than that, like sort of 50 to 70 gram mark, like Hilly said, it just slows them down, makes them a bit sluggish. Yes, they enjoy their meals a little bit more, but from a bodybuilding standpoint, I don't think there's any real benefit. I know that's very old-fashioned, and it's not what the bigger coaches do, but that's just from my experience.
I find some people with very fast metabolisms that seem to burn through carbs sharpish. Adding fats into their meals will slow that down a bit, and fats do make fats do seem to make the glycogen stick.
I agree.
So there is a benefit then. So again, it's so much of a personal thing. It's very hard to give. In terms of science, once you have enough fats to optimize hormones, then carbohydrates will benefit performance better. So more carbohydrates make sense. Carbohydrates also help spike insulin. Insulin is beneficial to building muscle, shuttling nutrients, protein synthesis. So in terms of on paper, if you're just talking nutritional science, once you've maximized the benefits out of the amount of fat you're getting, it would make sense to keep driving up carbohydrates until it becomes negative, until you feel too bloated, until you feel sluggish, until you get, until you're holding too much water. Then you may need to dip back down. So I think you would probably say finding where your thresholds are. Once you're at your thresholds, finding which one makes you feel less shit when you increase it.
I think his question is very, very good, right? But he's forgot the other macro, which is protein, right? And I think when protein's at a certain level, them other two things and the way you up them then affects as well. Because I've run high protein before with Hilly, and my stomach just could not handle it, right? It could not fucking handle it. We did a high protein, high carb, and it was not good. When this year we're doing a higher carb, moderate, the protein's quite low this year, Hilly, right? And it's the best my digestion's ever been, because this year on the rebound, I actually sent Hilly the plan. I want to run the protein quite low, and it's the best my digestion's been in about 10 years. And the carbs are high, but the fat's still quite low. So I can't really give a really, really good comment on how it's working so far. I think you've got to take the protein into account as well, because that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's the digestion. It comes back to the digestion, doesn't it? For you, who has a temperamental digestion, it wouldn't make sense to have them all high. We know this.
Yeah.
So it just comes back to what works best for you.
Also, if carbs aren't that high, how are you going to run 100 IUs of Atlantis a day?
Exactly.
Yeah. How are you going to cover all this?
But I do want to say as well, guys, when Hilly's talking about fats and fats sticking, he's not talking about all fats. All fats are not the same.
Yeah.
Some fats are going to act differently. Like, for example, coconut oil compared to olive oil, different way it works. Your nut butters are going to be different to you. Do you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah. And I think it's scenario dependent. Like, if we're talking about prep, those refeeds, load in, completely different ball game, which is not in the same context of this question. Because,
that's a different episode. It's a totally different topic.
Hamish was just in off season there.
Yeah.
So the last one to touch on then is Bethan's question on mindset when it comes to dealing with injuries and training, how to mentally accept adjusted training, self-belief that you're not going to lose gains. So this is because Bethan has been dealing with a really bad, what turns out to be hamstring issue for a while now. And just to point out, Bethan is literally probably the hardest working trooper that I have ever worked with. That girl, nothing slows her down, nothing stops her, nothing knocks her positive attitude. She has worked and suffered through this leg injury she's had for more or less all of the prep on and off. She has not mourned, she has not bitched. That girl is such an impressive individual.
She's made out of something else.
She's the equivalent of the Terminator. Like, literally, I know we have a running joke in our group chats, but like, it's great to salute people like this, because I don't say this in a cheesy way or very often, but there are very few people in this industry that truly inspire me, because I'm a bit egotistical, but she is just one of those people that I just have a grin from ear to ear when I watch her post every day, because she's doing the same shit every day, like a robot, and every time she steps on that shade, she smokes fucking everyone.
She's natural and she beats assisted goals, but yes, different topic, different day.
So in terms of a question, some mindset, and this was very hard for Beth. After each show, we had to literally take loads of rest and step back. Now, one of the main things to point out was we prepped for 20, 22, 23, 24, 25 weeks now. So she was, although she thought she was behind, she wasn't. So her condition is always bang on. And she had to take, I think at one point we took a week to 10 days off from training, no cardio, and she really had this in her head that it was going to screw everything. And what you've got to remember sometimes is when you've been in that prep situation for a prolonged period of time, your body needs the rest. It really does. The common term at the moment is fatigue, and it's a very real one. And once we psychologically got better to accept it, her physique actually got better the more she rested. She didn't wither away. She didn't lose the muscle that she thought she was going to. She actually got better from it. But what was important is, and what I expressed is, and I think this is important to mention, is my opinion was, if this keeps getting too painful, then we just need to take this step back. Your health must always come first. There's no point in pushing through things and risking a further injury. And then it just becomes to managing it, making sure that you adjust cardio, taper it down, put food in line with that. You can manage a lot of things to get better while you're on prep or while you're in a dieting phase, but it obviously depends on how close you are to the show after the show. And in terms of mindset around that, I do think that you've just always got to be focused on your health first and longevity. I have more injuries than most, and half of those are for being a moron and pushing through things when I shouldn't have done. So I try and preach to my clients. Learn from my mistakes. Don't end up with loads of injuries. Bodybuilding is going nowhere. Bodybuilding is not even Bethan, and Bethan is not even bodybuilding. She's going to smash this for an awful long time. If sometimes you need to take a step back, then you just need to get your head around that. And it's a very individual question, because everybody handles things differently, and it's hard to explain that sort of mindset unless you're in the situation. For us, we were in a great spot. She just won the overall at FedEx. We'd been dealing with it. We were absolutely inside out lean. We could afford to pull back. We discussed it. She did check-ins every day as normal. I made sure to tell her that if the pain was sharp or shooted at any point that she had an issue, to message me straight away. I think it's staying in tune with the people that you trust is probably a good one, to have solid advice. Not getting people, it's all right, push through it, just a bit of pain, work harder. That shit doesn't fly with a real injury. That's when you're tired from prep. You need to have solid people around you that you can speak to and get advice that you trust. I suppose that's a very big aspect.
What do you think, Deck?
So I'll flip this on its head, the question, and make it a bit more universal rather than just a Bethan. So this is something quite close to me, because it's something I experienced at a young age after playing football my whole life, where I blew my knees out. And the biggest thing that I can say to everybody, and I mean this, you experience with injuries, we experience with lockdown, is protect your mental health. And I sincerely mean that, because that was the first time I'd ever experienced a real dip, in the sense of like, what the fuck am I going to do now? I play football my life. I can't run anymore. I can't walk, all that sort of stuff. And it's very applicable to bodybuilding, because we are also one dynamic in a sense. Like, we have a goal and we are hell for leather achieving that goal no matter what happens. So when you do have that setback, the biggest thing that, and I really mean this, is to come away from the process, whatever that may be, off-season prep, whatever it is. Protect your mental health, reevaluate what you can do now, whether that means being active, keeping moving, staying on diet, speak to your coach, speak to your circle, like Hilly said. But I just cannot stress this enough. When we are in our bubbles, life's great. When that bubble bursts, as we all experienced during those lockdowns, I have no doubt this is within everybody's mindset when something like that happens. You really have to protect your mental health and understand what you can do, what you control at that moment in time. Keep your friends close to you. But ultimately, understand it's never really going anywhere. Like Hilly's broke his whole body. He's still training. I mean, he's still stronger than Riz. Not me, but stronger than Riz.
He's not.
But I'm just saying that you're always going to have something. There's always going to be an avenue there. So just don't think it's all doom and gloom. It's going to take some time. You're going to need some rehabilitation at some point. But the end goal remains. Just focus on what you can. And do not fucking rush about getting back to it too quickly. I've done it 100 times when I herniated my disc in my back. Every time I was mobile again, I was straight back in the gym doing something ridiculous like a bicep curl. Pop, it would go again, and I'd be paralysed from the waist down.
This is a topic which is a bit weird for me, right? I've never really experienced proper injury like Bethan, right? I had the knee problem, but it was never that bad, and I wasn't in a prep. When I did break my hand at uni, when I fell down, I still kept training. The goal was still the same. Whether I had a broken hand or not, I was still going to go do legs. I was still going to put the D handle on my elbow and do chest somehow, right? I think that's where you have to stay driven. But that you lot are both saying the mental health aspect, I think that's the bigger problem. I fucking hate talking about it. This year when D got ill, you lot all know I lost my mind. I lost it, right? And that was because that the stress was so big, and I was in that bubble of I need to prep. message Hilly every day. I'm gonna prep. I'm gonna win. I'm in the best stage of my life. I'm gonna win. He, as my mate's gonna say back to me, we're gonna smash it. And I was in that bubble. I didn't let anyone tell me anything. If Decker told me to stop then, I would have went fuck off. But sometimes you need to hit that all-time low and realise, you know what? I can take a step back. I've got loads of years left. Competing ain't gone. The bodybuilding never ever going to go. And I'll just go again. And it's all right to go again. That doesn't mean you failed. It just means the goal has gone a little bit further and you've actually learned something. And it should teach you to be better next time. And it very quickly puts into perspective how grateful you should be for when everything is fine as well.
100%.
People are always moaning, blah, 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 my arm's hurting. A lot of the time there's nothing wrong. You just got to be grateful for where you are.
But Beth, you are a legend. You do us all very, very proud. Keep kicking ass.
Yes, you are a legend, kid, without a shadow of a doubt.
And you come in conditioned on stage, unlike me and Deck.
Yeah.
We fucking up.
We're still fat.
I think that's us done, is it?
Yeah.
There's one more. If we just quickly fire this last one question, then I think that's everything done pretty much today.
Yeah.
Right, the last question is... Well, it's two. We'll go for the most important one. Recomposition. What is it? How long should one spend in this phase ideally? When is it time to do one? That's from Stephen Thomas, your client.
Say that again. What was it again?
Right, he wrote, recomposition. What is it? How long should one spend in this phase ideally? When is it time to do one?
It's quite a big question. For me, that's a recomposition. It really means where you are potentially adding muscle and dropping fat. And it's a very hard thing to pull off. It's not impossible, but it's situational dependent. So if you're new to weight training, if you're a beginner, and you create a huge novel stimulus, so you change things about, then your body, because there is such a sharp adaptation and a huge demand put on the body, it will potentially lose fat and build muscle if the nutrients are there. Then you have other scenarios where, say, you've been doing things on your own for a while, you sign up with a coach, you've been using a body part split, your protein's only been at, say, 200 grams, your nutrition hasn't been bang on. And what I would do then, and I do this quite a lot, and you can change into, say, an upper-lower split, so you're creating a huge increase in frequency, a huge increase in demand. Tighten up the nutrition, change the macro ratios around. Again, and it's forcing your body to do different things, and you will potentially see a recomposition effect then. Again, bringing drugs into the situation. So simply by increasing your testosterone from natural to anything elevated than that, increases the rate of protein synthesis, so that will potentially drive a recomposition effect. And then obviously increasing drugs from there. In theory, the more drugs you take, the more nutrient partitioning effect, the more potential for a recomp effect. How long will that last, or how long should you try for that, is situational dependent across those three environments. And not just that, very much, you could say genetic, you could say person. Some people may have better genetics and they continue to see a recomp effect. And if you're doing it right, whether a coach is doing it or whether you're doing it yourself, if you continue to create the right novel stimulus over time with the right nutritional support, you could in theory continue to drive a recomp effect for a longer period of time. But you're having to be very, very, very anal about things, and things need to run perfectly all the time. No illnesses, no injuries, no this, no that. So for most, it's not something that you would try and achieve for a prolonged period of time. I tend to focus on it when I have a new client that signs in that I know has been doing things very different, not saying wrong, but very different. They may be softer, they may be untrained, they may have not taken any anabolics for a while and they want to. When you've got all of these things to play with, it's a much easier goal to drive a recomp effect. If you've got a more advanced client comes in, or someone's like, I've been eating pretty good for a long time, I've been training hard, there's less chance of driving a recomp effect, so I would just be looking at either going or cutting at that stage.
This is not something I have fun doing, and I'm pretty confident in the process, or the only time I'm confident in nailing this almost 100% of the time now. And I think Hilly will probably laugh about this because it's something we talk about pretty frequently. Coming towards the end of that off-season period where you're extremely overfed and heavy, and you're dropping down to that cruise. Once you go into that process and you're starting to pull food away and dropping back into a deficit, sitting in that cruise period for a long period of time in a pretty extreme deficit, if you like. So you're tightening up throughout that cruise period. Let's just say that's 8 to 12 weeks. From then, keeping food extremely low. Once you've had blood work back and you've got the green light and everything go ahead, is to use the anabolics then to force that recomp without changing food. Now, the good thing that Hilly mentioned then is those timescales. Depending on how accurate you are, like I think this seems to pan out pretty well for the first 6 to 12 weeks, in my opinion. As long as that person, to a degree, is able to suffer. I've just done it this time around on very low food for a long period of time, allowing the anabolics to do the work in the gym, fill you back out a little bit, pull you in and tighten you off. And then once you're at that point, you'll see there's like a plateau period, which I'm also recently experiencing now, where weight just holds or it dips, it fluctuates a tight by a pound or two. At that point, that's normally a telltale sign to me that it's the end of that recomp period. You've got another 6, 8, 12 weeks of that blast to go. Now's the time to start cranking that food up and really pushing for new tissue. Yeah. But in my opinion, that's like my favorite time to use it. Yeah. And it's also something I gear up for now with every client. Like literally as I come to that cruise period, I gear my client up for it. I explain to them what I'm going to do. It's probably going to get a little bit tough because the anabolic's going to drop off. Food's going to be low. You're probably going to be a bit flat and soft. But once we introduce all the goodies back in, you'll infinitely look better and be in a better position to have a longer run off your off season.
And that is where it's very much a drug forced or drug created effect. Yeah. The other time, so that works great coming out of a cruise into the cycle. The other time, and again, I've done this with both you guys. We did it this year, Deck, is you may set up your first 8, 10, 12 weeks of a cycle, 16 weeks of a cycle. It's a growth phase. And this then brings back into the training that we were talking about at the start of the podcast. What we then did is switch the drugs. So you switch up your drugs that you're using. So say you're using Test and Deca, very basic. For the last 6 or 8 weeks of the cycle, you may then switch to say Test and a little bit of Trent and a little bit of Masteron. Yeah, same doses maybe, or even less. And what we did is, me and Deck, that's when we brought in the higher volume training. So you're creating a different stimulus, but the stimulus you were creating burns more calories within the session. So, and then what that allows us to do, you can almost keep food the same because output has increased through training. Then the way your body is partitioning nutrients has changed through the drug change, and you will see a recompositioning effect where you almost stay the same weight. And in bigger clients, so 230, 240, 250, 260 pounds, I've seen, so there's one of my clients, Zach, great guy in America, got a fantastic physique. He tends to sit between 250 and 260. I've seen us almost push up to over 250, close to 260, and then switch things around a bit and be able to stay between 250 and 60, but get better and better and better. Deck did something very similar before his cruise. The weight loss was very minimal, but the change in his physique over that time. And again, you're driving that recompositioning effect simply through changing output with training and approach, and then allowing the drugs to switch the way they partition nutrients, switch the way the metabolic processes are going on, and it's all drug induced, which is why I didn't go into too much details earlier. But it is with adding additions of a little bit of cardio, changing the way your food is, but you can keep the food more or less where it's at, and you will get a little bit leaner, a little bit harder. People tend to think that recompositioning is just gaining muscle and losing fat, but it's not really. It can be holding muscle and losing fat, because that will still give you a recomp effect if you will look bigger and larger, so to speak.
Yeah.
I agree with what both of you said, sir. No comment today.
Right,
guys,
I think that's us done.
Guys, that's a wrap for this episode. If you can like, comment and subscribe and let us know what you'd like us to cover in the next video, then just comment below. All our Instagrams are going to be in the description, and I'm going to try to timestamp this episode too if I can be bothered.
Fancy, it's fancy.
So yeah, let us know, and I'm going to upload this one at 1080p, guys, because 4K takes too long and it's pointless. I know a lot of you guys listen on the way to work or with your headphones on, so I think it's pretty much pointless having it at high quality. We just want to give out good quality advice.
And if you use code DECK10, you'll get 10% off Riz and D's OnlyFans. I'll put the link in the description.
Yes. Boy, she's gonna fuck you up. I'm gonna keep this on the video.
She's gonna fuck you up.
Our OnlyFans, we actually fry samosas and pakoras, mate. You'll see.
I was going to say that, but that was crossing the racism line.
Yeah, and if you sign up to the OnlyFans, you get a special discount code for the JP
Mate,
website.
she's converted me to basmati rice. It's all I've eaten since being back.
Guys, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see anything different, if you want to see me, Dietary, do more sessions together, let us know. If you want us to cover a certain topic, please comment in the bottom of the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Anything you want to see, guys, negative feedback, some trolling would be good as well. You know, cuss me out, it's all right. The hairline's gone. I understand we're all bald anyway. It's fine. Until the next episode, guys, in 2 weeks. If this hits 1,000 views, we'll do me, Hilly, and Deck had a conversation before the phone call last week, and that was, if we get 1,000 views each week, we will do a podcast every week. Please make it 1,000 views, because Hilly and Deck are going to get quite damn pissed off.